So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone again, wherever you are in different countries. We welcome you again to our weekly country level cluster updates, and we're really pleased today to have South Sudan presenting on the situation there, the work of the cluster, the current emergency and protracted situations that they're responding to. And I welcome very much Cornelius, who is the cluster coordinator from South Sudan. I think that we have a critical mass of people already joined, just over 20 people or so. There may be a few more joining, but without further ado, because time is scarce, we will hand over to Cornelius to begin his presentation, and then as usual, we'll break into some question and answer time afterward. Thanks everyone. Over to you, Cornelius.
Thank you, Brett. Good afternoon, colleagues, and greetings from South Sudan. So today I'll present the country context and response strategy, including HLP and the challenges and gaps we are facing. Without wasting much time, I'll go ahead with the presentation. The agenda today, as I've mentioned, is about South Sudan context, shelter strategy response, modalities and key activities, the response, current seasonal events, and how they are impacting the communities. Before I proceed further, I just wanted to mention also that we shall be two presenters. I'll be presenting the shelter core activities, and my colleague Joseph Olum will present the HLP slides, which are about 4 of them. So going into the context, South Sudan has experienced 5 years of conflict that has forced nearly 4.2 million people to flee their homes in search of safety. Nearly 2 million of them within South Sudan and 2.2 million outside South Sudan. At the beginning of 2019, the population inside the UNMISS protection of civilian sites had stabilized at approximately 200,000 people. UNMISS is currently redesignating these POCs into IDP camps, with the reason that the South Sudan political and security context has changed with the cessation of hostilities since the signing of the revitalized peace agreement. On 28th of February 2020, a government of national unity was formed after the signing of the revitalized peace agreement between the concerned parties. The peace agreement is generally holding. IDPs have started to return home from POCs, collective sites, and informal settlements, as well as neighboring countries. A major trigger for the displacement currently is from a combination of factors that include localized violence, subnational conflict, and national disasters, flooding. As of September 2020, approximately 650 individuals had been displaced by floods, and flooding incidents have already been reported in 2021, with approximately 106,000 individuals displaced since July 2020. Some of the key challenges that we continue to see are the continued sub-national violence and localized conflict. This is an obstacle to successful transitions and returns. Housing, land and property, evictions, secondary occupation, documentation, multiple claimants, discrimination against women to access HLP are some of the issues that we face now. We shall discuss this in detail as we go along. First, I'll take you to after the context, I'll take you to the cluster coordination structure. The cluster coordination structure is as you see on the screen, with the National Cluster Coordination Team. With IOM as the cluster coordinator, then we have the cluster co-coordinator from NRC, and we have a roving coordinator from a national NGO called African Development Aid. And we have a full-time dedicated management information officer. Closely working with the cluster is the Shelter Core Pipeline managed by IOM, and we have the SAG, which is also is comprising seven members from different agencies: UNHCR, IOM, NRC. I've lost the PowerPoint. Sorry, I've lost the PowerPoint. If I could quickly, don't know why that's so. Just excuse me. I've lost my PowerPoint. Let me just try to get it back. Apologies for that, some technical challenge here. Sorry for that. So we have the SAG, which is we have IOM, UNHCR, NRC, ADA, SUDA, SPEDEP, and ECHO. ECHO is the donor that sits on the SAG. Also on the cluster structure, we have state focal points from all the 10 states. Jongole, represented by Polish African Action and also ADA. Then we have Upper Nile, DRC and Sudan, Med-Air for Central Equatoria, Unity, Concern Worldwide, Western Bahar Gazelle, IOM, Northern Bahar Gazelle, NRC, Lakes State is COS, and Warap COS, Eastern Equatoria acted, and Western Equatoria EDA. That is the cluster structure. In terms of the cluster response strategy, the cluster in South Sudan focuses on 4 main areas: the emergency needs for new displacements. We have care and maintenance for those in protracted displacements, transition and recovery assistance where conditions allow, and we support resilience building and access for housing, land, and property to achieve durable solutions. The response strategy is accompanied by a menu of activities that span different phases of response, but are tailored to individual contexts. For example, the context of Bentu IDP camp means that responses are different from those of Juba IDP camp 1 and 3, Bo IDP site, or Naivasha IDP site. The strategy is also careful to highlight that the needs in multiple contexts need to be addressed, and that although IDP camps and settlements have attracted a lot of humanitarian assistance, support is required for those settled in other types of locations, such as those with host communities, or for pastoralists who have received sudden shocks, such as unexpected flooding. Response modalities. Here we have in-kind assistance. That means loose items, including the tarpaulins, blankets, mosquito nets, ropes, kangas, kitchen sets, sleeping mats, solar lamps, bamboo bundles. We also have wooden poles, sandbags, survival kits, and distribution. I mean, these are coordinated with OCHA, WASH, and food security and nutrition. We coordinate with protection in the distribution of stoves, and we also provide some return packages, which are still under discussion. The purpose will be for people returning from displacement sites to places of origin. In terms of cash and voucher assistance, shelter programs can use cash and vouchers for assistance in many ways. The starting point is a solid market assessment combined with a protection risk assessment. The protection risk assessment will ensure that safety concerns and any risks associated with cash programming have appropriate risk mitigation strategies set in place. Cash and voucher assistance can be used in many ways to support with purchase of household items, for transport of people, possessions of materials for fuel, for training, or part of cash for work programs. Where conducted, it should be coordinated with other sectors, and the amounts of assistance coordinated with the agreed minimum expenditure basket. The shelter cluster in South Sudan has also been involved in the COVID responses. We have included the face covering clothes in the list of S-NFI pipeline. We have also supported colleagues from health cluster with providing case management, shelters for case management. This has been done in some sites, Wow and in Malacca. We have also supported decongestion of crowded shelters through partitioning of communal shelters to reduce transmissions and exposure. We have supported shelter upgrades in and outside the POCs to increase social distancing and reduce vulnerabilities. We are working with WASH partners in the distribution process to ensure that the distribution sites have sanitized wash basins, and also ensure that there is social distancing, and also we provide some sanitizing agents for people assembled. It is very key to ensure that we do not have distribution sites as super spreaders of COVID. At this moment, I will call upon my colleague Joseph Olum to provide to present the slides on HLP. Then I'll return to complete the remaining slides. Over to you, Joseph. I'll do the control of the slides.
Okay, thank you, Cornelius. Good afternoon, colleagues. As Cornelius says, my name is Jamus Joseph. I am the HLP advisor for IOM in South Sudan. I will just go through a background of HLP challenges in South Sudan. I hope everybody hears me well there. As many of you know, South Sudan has experienced recurrent conflicts, and this started just 1 year before independence in 1955. A armed conflict started and continued until 1972, when an agreement was signed, and then there was a spell of peace until 1983, when another conflict started. This lasted for a long period until 2005. And again, another conflict started in 2013 up to now, even though there is peace after the agreement Cornelius mentioned, the revitalized peace agreement. Each of these conflicts displaced so many people, and a lot of them had stayed in displacement. Some of them returned at each of the stages of these several conflicts. But also there are sporadic subnational conflicts and natural disasters, as my colleague Cornelius mentioned. Natural disasters like flooding, mostly in the lowlands of South Sudan, that is the floodplains. It occurs there annually. The degree of flooding, of course, varies from 1 year to another. Now, these conflicts and natural disasters have led to several layers of displacement. The latest one, which my colleague mentioned, led to displacement of about 4 million people, IDPs and refugees. And each of these, or all of them, left behind their housing, land, and property assets. Now, many of the assets have been taken over by secondary occupants, by illegal appropriation, illegal sale of those housing, land, and property assets, as well as land grabbing. And there are several other things that we will mention as issues related to HLP. Now, other HLP issues that I could mention here include absence of tenancy authentication documents, lack of or weak dispute resolution mechanism, increasing number of HLP disputes, and as my colleague mentioned, discrimination against women and other disadvantaged groups, and then forceful eviction, unplanned expansion of urban centers, leading to land grabbing in peri-urban areas in most of the urban centers of South Sudan. Also, we have issues with sale of, for example, one plot to multiple buyers. And potentially there could be also issues with expansion of extractive industries as people are moved to leave space for extraction of petroleum, for instance, or minerals. So there are a number of HLP issues in South Sudan. Now, as my colleague mentioned, the revitalized agreement was signed, and this resulted into tranquility and redesignation of the POCs. And this, in turn, triggered return of IDPs and refugees. Okay. Yeah. And this return has been trickling, but it's expected to increase with progress in the implementation of the agreement. Now, as the return increases, we also expect that reclamation of abandoned HLP assets by the rightful returnee owners will increase. And this will escalate the already many violations of HLP-related laws and people's rights to housing, land, and property. It could also lead to disturbance of public order and tranquility, and all of this could increase as a result. And of course, dispute will definitely also arise with claims and counterclaims. Now, potential for destabilizing the fragile peace is real. As you can see, if the dispute expands and increases in different parts of the country, and some of the disputes will very likely, as we have seen, could lead to violent conflicts. Now, humanitarian shelter activities could unintentionally violate or escalate pre-existing HLP issues. Therefore, the Shelter NFI coordination unit here is training South Sudan cluster partners on HLP rights, which could help them avoid this unexpected escalation of disputes. Now, we have 26 active Shelter NFI cluster partners, partner organizations that we have targeted for training. Our aim there is to embed HLP in humanitarian shelter operations in all 10 states of South Sudan. Now, HLP relevant non-S-NFI cluster and inactive cluster member organizations are also engaged. Local government HLP relevant personnel at state and county level are also involved in this training. They benefit from it. And then traditional authorities like chiefs and sub-chiefs at the county, Payam and Boma level. These are the subnational levels of administration. So these people also benefit from the training on housing, land, and property rights. Then other subnational HLP relevant stakeholders institutions are also targeted, which include the military, the police force, RRC. This is an institution that is responsible for relief and rehabilitation. Then the Ministry of Gender, as well as the judiciary. All of these have something to do with housing, land, and property. That's why we engage them. So far, we have covered 3 states, Central Equatorial State, that's where Juba sits, and then Unity State, as well as Western Bahr Ghazal State. Out of that, we have trained 106 individuals from the different states, these 3 states. Beneficiary institutions, the Shelter NFI cluster partners, about 24 organizations benefited from it. HLP relevant local government authorities, 3 states, from the 3 states and 5 counties benefited. That's from the training. And then traditional authority, 3 paramount chiefs also benefited. And then we have, where am I? Yeah, and then one state judiciary, that is Western Bahr Ghazal State. Then the police force, also from Western Bahr Ghazal, as well as the military and the Ministry of Gender, also from Western Bahr Ghazal. But also recently, which I have not included here in this presentation, we have been training the police force, law enforcement officers on community policing, which we thought was very instrumental, because they are the people who are the first to be called if there is dispute, if there is conflict related to housing, land, and property. Now, challenges we faced in this capacity building, mobilization at the subnational level was particularly difficult. For example, in the rainy season, as partner organizations in remote areas cannot make it to the state capitals. In those areas where the rainy season makes it difficult to travel, getting the partners from counties far away from the capital is very, very difficult. Also, we face a challenge having a proportional number of females in the training. Only few female partner members participated. So the way forward is to try to increase the number of trainings during the dry season, so that even those who are living far away can at least attend. We intend to continue covering the remaining states, 7 more states left, which hopefully within coming months we should be covering them. And we will try to encourage the partners to send female participants to the training, so they too will benefit from this. That is very critical, because a lot of the challenges we face are related to female difficulties females face in accessing HLP. And the training will include HLP relevant senior subnational government officials, because so far subnational government officials that attended are more or less junior officials. So we are trying to make sure that decision makers do participate in these trainings for this to be effective. I think, Cornelius, if I'm right, this is the last slide, right?
All right, thank you, Joseph. I'll pick on from there to continue the other cluster activities. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
So, yeah, I'm now going to present the cluster response for 2020 and also compare with where we are for 2021. In 2020, we managed to assist 1 million individuals. As you can see from the map and the graph, 64% of those assisted were affected by conflict, and 34% were affected by flood. The majority, 50%, were IDPs, and then 21% were host community, and 13% returnees, and others were 6%. That was 2020. Compared to 2021, as of July 2021, we have so far reached 675,000 individuals assisted with shelter and NFIs, of which this time round 59% of those assisted have been affected by flooding, and 21% from conflict, which is subnational violence as the trigger. So if you compare this to 2020, the trend has totally changed. So, and then other national conflict is 20%. We have subnational violence, and also we have localized violence. So the majority of those assisted so far are from flooding. Individuals reached by the type of the population, IDPs, of course, constitute the biggest percentage, 65%, then host community, and then we have the returnees. That is what we have done so far in South Sudan as of July 2020. Moving on, in terms of the pipeline, we have processed 131 requests for S-NFI items, and we have done 103 S-NFI distributions and 28 prepositioning. The agency has supported 7 international NGOs, 13 national NGOs, and one UN agency. 1,197 metric tons of items have been transported, 859 by road, 150 metric tons by air, and 188 metric tons by river. Procurement, we have done, the pipeline has done procurement worth $3.7 million US. And as of 2021, we have secured 72% of the funding requested for the pipeline. The ask was 10 million, and now it is funded by 72%. That is the pipeline which is managed by IOM. 2021, let me talk about the 2021 Humanitarian Response Plan. We have 26 partners, of which 2 are UN agencies, 10 international NGOs, and 14 national NGOs. The ask for 2021 in the HRP is almost about $33 million, and targeting 1 million individuals. So far, we have secured $11.6 million out of 33. This is according to the status report from partners as of June 2021. With this funding, we have reached 675,000 individuals of the target, of which 400,000 are flood affected and 270,000 are conflict and subnational violence. The gaps, we still have a gap of $21.3 million. We hope that by the end of the year, we should have made some progress on this, and we have to reach 409,000 individuals. The challenges that we face. The funding challenges, funding status does not include multi-sector projects. With this funding, we do not include the multi-sector projects, because right now we also having multi-sector approaches where donors are funding WASH, for instance, for WASH, CCCM, protection, and S-NFI. So it is difficult in the FTS to pick out the sectors, but this, what I've mentioned here, does not include that. So the challenges we have, like the pipeline break, where some items are on a higher demand than others, and so we get a shortage during the response. That has been very common, especially during the flooding incidents. Then we have funding, unpredictable funding, and then the HLP issues. Access due to impassable roads, insecurity in operational areas, sometimes leading to loss of life of humanitarian workers. Those are some of the biggest challenges we are facing in South Sudan. As I mentioned before, the response gaps and challenges, we have lack of predictable funding, access due to flooding and subnational violence, COVID-19 restrictions on travel, workshops to train partners is also has been really a big challenge for us since the emergence of COVID. We have not had training, we have not held workshops, we have conducted our meetings online, and we don't know how long this will take, but it seems to be really a big problem for us, because capacity building is one of our key areas that we really need to work upon to ensure that the national NGOs have their capacities built. Continued subnational violence leading to increased insecurity in operational areas and loss of life. Sometimes so many humanitarian workers have been lost, lives of humanitarian workers have been lost recently. I think this year alone it could be 9 people who have been killed while they are trying to work in the rural areas where there is conflict. So those are the major challenges that we are facing in South Sudan. So at this point, I'll invite questions from the attendants of this presentation. So I'll open the floor for questions. Over to you, colleagues. Can you read it?
Thanks very much, Cornelius, and colleagues, for the presentation. If I may just take the opportunity to start with a question, it's really more on the HLP side. When there was the discussion on training of partners, government officials and others in HLP processes, I think it was James was explaining everything. What has been the result? I mean, apart from awareness raising, have you seen any improvement in terms of understanding of HLP issues on the ground, or reduction in disagreements or issues that are based on HLP or competition over or land or so forth? Have you seen an outcome for the advocacy efforts that you've been able to put in, James? Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. I'll give some response, then I'll let Joseph come in. This training has just been concluded, so I think we shall do some kind of survey to understand the incidence of HLP, if they are either escalating or going down. That's when we can measure the impact. But Joseph, can you come in and try to give us some more light on that? Joseph Jamus.
Thank you, Cornelius, and thanks, Brett, for the question. As my colleague Cornelius said, this training has just begun. We only covered 3 states out of 10, and the results, it's difficult to say we have seen the results, but the first training was done in Juba, and one of the directors, the director for land from the ministry in Juba, came and attended. Actually, he was the one who presided over the opening and the closing of the training, and it was his recommendation. He said it was very important to ensure that we also included authorities responsible for governance of land, because there is a lot of land issues, and that's how we expanded to include subnational authorities at the state and the county level. Now, it will take a little bit more time, like my colleague said, for us to be able to say, yes, here is the result from the impact of our training. Probably after we are done with most of the states and we do some kind of assessment, and we should be able to see whether there is a reduction in disputes related to housing, land and property. Back to you, Cornelius.
Yeah, thanks to you, Joseph. Brett, I don't know whether that answers your question, but I would invite more questions if, yeah.
Thanks to you both. That was well answered, and I see it's, as you're really strengthening the HLP knowledge, I guess you'll get dividends and outcomes in the coming months and years. So it's good to see what the ultimate impact will be. But yeah, work in progress. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. More questions, please.
Cornelius, there's a question in the chat also from Mustafa Grima. I don't know if you can see it.
Can you read it, please, if you can?
Okay, so Mustafa says, thanks, Cornelius. I see we have a good representation of cluster partners in the SAC. I would like to know how the cluster engages with the government. To what extent does the government participate to influence decisions through the SAC? So that's a question. And then just to tell you, Saeed Idris has his hand up as well. After this. Okay.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone.
Yes.
Can I ask my question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Cornelius, for your nice presentation. My name is Idris. I'm from the Afghan Red Crescent Society from Afghanistan. I have a question of including two parts in the response section, as you mentioned in your presentation. The first response that you said was about the NFI distribution to the affected people. So what is the capacity of the local market in South Sudan as you did this?
I lost you at
Can you hear me?
Can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, I can repeat. Yeah, you have mentioned about the response mechanisms here and the two options. One was for the NFI distribution to the affected people, and one was the cash and voucher for the...
Saeed, can you type? Saeed, can you type? Can you type your question, please, in the chat? I seem to be losing.
Okay, I'll type.
Okay. As you type, let me try to answer Mustafa. Mustafa, thank you for your question. We have not yet involved the government into the SAG. They are not part of the SAG, but we engage with the government through the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. So our engagement is directly through the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. They are also part of the Housing and Land and Property. Also, the government is represented from the Ministry of Urban Development, Housing and Urban Development at the HLP Technical Working Group. Those are the two ministries that we work with. Then there is also the Ministry of Disaster Risk Management, where we are doing some bit of DRR to mitigate flood effects. So those are the three ministries that we engage with. But at the SAG, we don't engage with the government. The SAG, we have a donor representative, we have the two UN agencies, and then the rest are international NGOs and NGOs. Yeah. I hope that answers your question, Mustafa. Saeed, if I can answer partly what I was able to capture from your question, we are looking at what's the capacity of NFIs in the country. So
yes, I can repeat now.
Okay, please.
What is the capacity of the local market in South Sudan, and as well as for the cash and voucher? You might have some market assessment as well. Is the capacity of the market in the South Sudan enough for the cash and voucher distribution or not? This was my question.
Thank you. For cash and voucher, there are some vibrant markets in some parts of the country, but not. It varies from location to location. If you go to Western Bahar Ghazal, for instance, in Wau, the markets are very vibrant, and you can be able to buy some items from the market. Whereas when you go to places like Jongore, there is no market which is functional. Either there is conflict or there is flooding, and the markets are underwater. So those areas we insist on in-kind distributions relying on the cluster pipeline. So the markets vary from location to location. If you look at Juba, for instance, you can find plastic sheets. Most of the NFI items are in the market in the urban areas like Juba, in some parts of Eastern Equatoria, Western Equatoria. But then you have those areas where you have insecurity and flooding. The markets are not working.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, I think Cornelius muted himself. I don't know if there are any other questions. Otherwise, I have one concerning the underfunding challenge that we heard about. I was wondering, like, if Cornelius or Joseph, you have any ideas of what could be like the major causes of this underfunding, and any ideas on how to address the underfunding challenges? Thank you.
Thank you, Kimja. If you look at the South Sudan conflict, it has really been protracted conflict. I don't know. We had first of all from 2013, then we had some bit of relative peace, then again 2013, and then it's a combination of factors. So there is partly donor fatigue, I could say, but we also the challenges, the demand, and looking at the global situation with all these crises globally, and the conflict in South Sudan doesn't seem to be ending. So I think also the donors are looking at those critical areas to fund those critical areas that are more life-threatening. I don't mean to say that shelter is not more life-threatening, but when you look at if you look at the FTS, more money is going into food security, and South Sudan as a country is sometimes they refer to it as a famine country. Food security takes the biggest share of the budget. So we need to do a lot of advocacy with support from the global shelter cluster. Probably they can help on this, where we have to explain that shelter, just like any other sectors, is a life-saving intervention, because without shelter, there is also risk to exposure to elements, weather elements, diseases, all this kind of stuff, as you may know. So I think the advocacy has to come from all sides to be able to put shelter at the front like any other sectors. I don't know whether Jamus you have anything to add on that.
No, I think you answered that very well. I don't have any additional item to add to it.
There is also, is there anything else? I see another question from Mustafa. Is requesting to elaborate a bit on specific S-NFI activities partners are implementing towards transition and recovery. Yes, here we are supporting by transition. What we are doing in transition, we are supporting returnees mainly with a bit of shelter to enable them start up with some kind of transitional shelter. We provide the plastic sheets, wooden poles, and rubber ropes, so they can have some bit of shelter before they transition to building their own. You know, most of the shelters in South Sudan are the traditional tukuls. Sometimes you don't have grass because people have returned in the wrong season, or sometimes they don't have peace at home, so they are in secondary displacement. We also in WOW, there has been a lot of work done on recovery with the reconstruction of damaged shelters. We have partners constructing one-room houses in terms of settlement programming. We have seen IOM doing a lot of settlement programming, mobilizing communities to build, to contribute material. Then they are assisted with the CGI and some other shelter materials. UNHCR has done the same also for damaged shelters in areas like Malaka, where people are returning home and finding their shelters damaged. So it's a combination of what kind of shelters in a location. In Jongole, for instance, people live in tukuls, they don't live in CGI. So in the absence of grass, you give them some plastic sheets, then they will be able to, as grass grows, they are able to cover. I mean, with the thatch. So that is the kind of stuff we are doing for transition and recovery.
Thank you, Cornelius. I just wanted to flag that there's another question in the chat from
Yes, I've seen how to integrate inclusion and community empowerment near strategy. So inclusion is, I mean, we have what we call, we follow the AAP accountability for affected persons. We involve everybody to ensure that from the project development, we do a lot of assessment involving the communities, ensuring that all parties and their interests are taken care of. This is done through the assessments, during the HNO assessments, and also when partners go to respond, they will ensure that every category of people with disabilities, women, girls, and boys are all included. That's how the inclusion part. We have complaints and feedback mechanisms where the desks are set up at the onset of the response and ensuring that all this feedback is taken into account. If there are people left behind, then we have to quickly go back and ensure that this is corrected. So we use the AAP, the complaints and feedback mechanism, all these processes as you know them, to ensure that nobody is left behind. I hope I've answered you, Mr. Muama.
Yeah, hi, and yeah, almost, yeah. that's an inclusion part. And how do you ensure community empowerment? I mean, I've been in South Sudan before. I worked there, mainly in Malakar. And I can see from the picture that it's the same type of more community shelters which has been going on even in WOW now. So with this type of construction, how do we ensure that the community are empowered to actually replicate, so that humanitarian, now that the fund you said that are going down, the funding is going down, how do you ensure that community can actually take off from there and building this and even build back better? Because I can see it's the same thing since I left in 2016. Thank you.
Right now, what we are doing is that we are trying to cut back on to ensure that we don't kill the coping mechanisms of the communities. We only target. We are doing targeting for those most vulnerable people who cannot support themselves. But whereas communities are able to support themselves, you'd rather give them cash for work projects so that they can be able to support themselves. And this, they are doing it through the resilience programs. But for the kind of work we are doing, for instance, the long term, we are mainly focusing on emergencies, and then we let the nexus take over. And we have like IOM has some settlement programming that is happening in WOW, and is community based. And I think they replicate it with the availability of funding. They can replicate in the other areas. We can provide to you more information if you can actually see more of these kind of projects on the website. With that link that is shared on the whatever, you can see a lot of these kind of community programs on the Shelter website for South Sudan. Kimja, do we have any more questions? I see Joseph's hands up. Joseph.
Yes, I just wanted to mention also one other thing that we are doing. I mean, we plan to do. We earlier in the year, we did survey on training needs assessment on our partners, focusing on HLP, but also on HLP due diligence standards. And it was obvious from that survey that we have to provide information, but also training, as well as material to the partners on due diligence, HLP due diligence. It's absolutely necessary because a lot of them are not aware of how to avoid, unplanned escalation of HLP disputes. HLP disputes that are maybe subliminal or active but not escalated. So it's important to train them on this. I wonder whether colleagues from other locations are doing the same and are training their partners on HLP due diligence.
Joseph, is that a question? Or?
Yeah, the end is the question.
A question to the participants, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and if we can learn from their experience.
I don't see any response.
Yeah.
I think, just if I may add in there, Ibere was online before, and Joseph, I guess Ibere has been there as well for a support mission in the past. He does have a lot of resources and information that he's provided in other countries. So I think that there's a good amount of, comparative analysis with what the HLP situation is in other countries. And I also guess at the, regional level within neighbouring countries as well, there's a lot of HLP approaches going on and some good lessons learned there. Do have a look at the Shelter Cluster website, and you can see the different kinds of guidance that is out and coming out, and there might be some good lessons learned there. Plus, just to let you and maybe others know as well, that with the BHA grant that's come to the Shelter Cluster, a second global HLP focal point is being recruited, and that position's also being hosted by IOM on behalf of the cluster, and that's also for missions, country level support, etc.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you, Brett, for that.
Pleasure.
So, Kim, yeah, I don't see any questions. I don't know whether we should end the session or.
Yes, just to let you know, I shared some links in the chat on the HLP. And yes, I think if there are no other questions, Brett, do you want to close the meeting?
Thank you, Kimya. Quite happy to. Normally we have, one of the co-leads opening and one of the co-leads closing, but our IFRC colleagues are actually on leave today. So the opening and closing comes to me, but quite happily so. So thank you very much, Cornelius, for the presentation, and to all your colleagues for the contribution as well. Certainly Joseph also for his component on HLP. You've got a really complicated and interesting context there with, as you explained, the legacy caseload, the protracted displaced population plus constant new displacements. So you've got really a range of different coordination contexts, a whole lot of different kinds of shelter responses, really from the emergency right through to durable solutions. And I could see from the comments of Mustafa and Wama that there's a big emphasis also obviously needed on trying to find solutions for the displaced population, heavily reliant on agreed HLP processes too. So yeah, you've got a lot of work there. I hope that there's ongoing donor support. I know there's challenges in terms of resource acquisition as well, but you've got a good community of people that are also supporting and working, so we wish you all the best. Thank you very much, Cornelius, and thank you all the colleagues online as well. Just to remind everyone, we'll continue with these weekly country cluster updates. Kimya, we have Honduras booked for same time next week for 2 p.m. Geneva time next Wednesday. And we'll post any more details and information that's coming out around that, but it is scheduled to be Honduras. So thanks again to all the colleagues for coming online from various parts of the world. We wish you all the best, and thanks for showing your interest and support to the South Sudan cluster. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Brett, and thank you, Kim, and everybody, all the participants on this session. And goodbye. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks, Cornelius. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.